Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little for PokerCoaching.com, and today we have an interesting hand featuring one of my favorite players to watch, Tom Dwan. So here, he's in the hijack seat playing 2,000, 4,000 with a 4,000 ante. We're playing for pounds, not dollars, so they're worth, well, even more in terms of dollars. Tom Dwan with a 300,000 stack raises it up to 13,000 with ace-7 of hearts, so he's about 75 big blinds deep. Elton Tsang calls in the cutoff with jack-10 of hearts, which is perfectly acceptable and reasonable. Around to Xuan in the big blind with jack-2 of diamonds. He decides to call. I think I would probably just fold here. This is one of these scenarios where if it's a heads-up pot, you could at least consider playing because you're somewhat unlikely to be dominated. But it's important to realize that as more and more people get into the pot, hands like jack-2 and queen-3 and king-5 and even ace-6, all these hands become a little bit more likely that they are extremely dominated by one or both players. And that's really not where you want to be. Like in this scenario, say Tom Dwan had pocket 7s and Elton Tsang had jack-10 of hearts, right? At that point, the jack is no good, the 2 is no good, and this jack-2 of diamonds is just in awful shape. Sometimes you're going to be against better flush draws, and you make a flush and you still lose. So heads up, you're less likely to be dominated, so it's like okay to splash around. But against multiple opponents, you should just be folding these hands, I think. Also, this was a 3 big blind raise, like a 3.25 big blind raise. If this was a min raise, I think the jack-2 diamonds becomes a way better call. But facing a 3 big blind raise or a 4 big blind raise, like you're often going to encounter in many cash games, you definitely want to be folding these hands just because you're not getting all that great of odds. Before we see the flop, if you are enjoying my content here, check out PokerCoaching.com. There I have tons and tons and tons of educational training videos like this, where I go in depth and ask you what you would do in all sorts of situations so that you can get immediate real-time feedback. You can go get a completely free trial membership at PokerCoaching.com. Also, click subscribe. I would appreciate it. All right, we're going to see the flop 3 ways. Flop comes king, king, 7. Giving Tom Dwan a pair and everybody else nothing. Xuan checks the jack-2 of diamonds. This is a spot where Tom Dwan is going to want to bet frequently using a small size. On uncoordinated boards, when you have the range advantage, you usually just want to be betting small and frequently, and that is exactly what Tom Dwan does. You may say, why do you want to bet small and frequently? Well, if you run your range, your entire pre-flop range against your opponent's ranges, usually you're going to be a bit of a favorite. And if you're a bit of a favorite across the board, you want to be betting small. And you also want to be betting small because when you are bluffing in this scenario and you run into a king, or you have like pocket jacks or ace-7 and you run into a king, you want to make sure you lose the minimum amount possible. When you do have a king, you also want to bet small because you want to keep your opponents in, because with whatever they have, they're drawing very, very thin. So this is a spot where you do want to be betting small and frequently. We discussed this thoroughly in my cash game masterclass at PokerCoaching.com. You can check that out at PokerCoaching.com/premium. There we have my cash game masterclass where I explain everything you need to know to crush cash games, and this is a very, very common spot that comes up. So Tom Dwan does bet small, and now notice here Tsang decides to call with jack-10 of hearts. You may say, why in the world would you want to call with jack-10 of hearts? Well, right here, he can generally presume that if he does somehow make a backdoor straight or a backdoor flush, he's probably going to get paid off. Now, of course, he could be against a hand like king 8. So if he somehow backdoors a 9 and an 8, he's perhaps could still lose. So he has to be a little bit cautious. However, if he knows that Tom Dwan plays a little bit too loosely and also maybe bets the flop every single time and then will check fold determine he misses, then this is a situation where this is referred to as floating, has a lot of merit. When you call a bet with the idea that you're probably going to try to steal the pot on the turn or the river, that's a float, and it's a pretty reasonable strategy when you're in position, especially when you're facing a small bet and you have the potential to improve to a good hand with good turns and rivers. So the turn's a 9. That makes Tom Dwan's hand get worse, right, proportionally. It makes his hand go from, a decent marginal made hand to now a very clear marginal made hand. Whenever you are playing, you always want to be asking yourself, do I have a premium made hand that I can just bet all 3 streets for value, which is not this hand? Do I have a draw that needs to either get my opponent to fold or improve to win? This is also not a draw, right? Because we have middle pair, or bottom pair, I guess. Is this a marginal made hand? Yes, it is. Or is this a junk hand, like it has no shot to win unless I bet or improve? And whenever you have a marginal made hand or just a totally bad hand, usually you're going to want to just be checking. And the idea is to check and then check call a bet. With your best made hands and your draws, you usually want to be applying aggression. This is when you do not necessarily have the range advantage or the nut advantage. If these are new terms to you, again, check out pokercoaching.com/premium for the Cash Game Masterclass. Anyway, in this scenario, Tom Dwan has a check, I think, and if he does face a bet from Tsang, he probably needs to call. It's not a great spot. You obviously lose to every king, but we do know from playing with Tsang a decent amount and watching him play that he enjoys bluffing. So in this scenario, Tsang does make a small bet, which is actually kind of unnerving, 24,000. Notice how I just said you want to be betting your best made hands and your draws. Tsang clearly has a draw here, right? So he wants to be betting. This is a hand that if he does fail to improve, he definitely needs to be betting the turn plus the river as a bluff. If he gets there, well, he's also going to be betting the river, right? So either way, he's going to be betting the river in this scenario. And Dwan does make the reluctant call. River is the 8 of spades, which is also not a great card, because if you think about all of the various floats that Tsang could have, he could have all of the backdoor flush draws with backdoor straight draws, right? So he could have hands like 9-8, 10-9, Jack-10. He could randomly have Queen-Jack or Queen-10. He may not have the offsuit versions of those. Maybe he 3-bets or folds the offsuit versions pre-flop. Some hands that would obviously bluff the turn and then bluff the river include probably all the Queen-Jacks with the backdoor flush draw. So Queen-Jack of hearts, clubs, and diamonds. Also Queen-10 of hearts, clubs, and diamonds. So there's 6 combinations of bluffs there. Notice that 10-9 would value bet the turn, but doesn't really need to be bluffing the river. Same thing for 10-8. If 10-8 called the flop bets, it just got there on the river, which you lose to that. If you had 8-6 for like kind of a loose float, you lose to that. If you had 7-6, I guess you beat that, but he wouldn't need to be bluffing with that one. If you had 5-4, that got there as well. So you see like all of the, 6-5. 6-5 got there as well. So in this scenario, basically all the backdoor draws, besides a few of them, got there. He could also have, I suppose, a hand like Ace-10 of diamonds that would consider bluffing, or Ace-5 of diamonds. But maybe he bluffs those, maybe he doesn't, because those do have at least a tiny bit of showdown value. Not a ton, but some. The problem, though, is that Tom Dwan loses to a lot of made hands. Think about this. If Tsang had King-Queen, perhaps suited or offsuit, maybe he just calls on the button, and then he would obviously bet the turn using a small size and blast the river, right? So all the King-Queens are available, King-Jacks are available, King-10s are available, King-9 suited, King-8 suited, maybe King-7 suited, right? There's a whole lot of King-X that would play in this exact manner. He could also have a hand like Pocket 9s or Pocket 8s. Those got there as well. So even though there are a few bluffs available that Tsang could have, there are just tons of made hands in this scenario. So when this board runs out like this, I think Dwan really only has one option, and that is to check fold. It's a pretty unfortunate spot for him. If he had a hand like queens, a pair of queens or a pair of jacks or a pair of 10s, or maybe even something like Ace-9, I think he probably does need to check call a river bet. Obviously, if he has a king, he's going to check call. That said, he probably just bets a king on the turn, right? It's important to realize in Tom Dwan's scenario here that he really probably doesn't have all that many very strong hands. So he wants to make sure he is bluff catching at least some portion of the time. And usually in this scenario, you want to be bluff catching with either the hands that block the effective nut hands for your opponent, or you want to be bluff catching with just the best hands in your range. Especially if your opponent could potentially be value betting with slightly worse hands. In this scenario, Tsang does decide to go for a big bet. He bets a little bit more than the size of the pot, essentially polarizing his range, meaning he either has a really good made hand or nothing. I am sure that Tom Dwan has a good idea of what Tsang is doing in this spot. Tsang's probably just playing well in this scenario, though, where he's going to be at least reasonably balanced. And I like the overbet here. This is a scenario where if Tom Dwan has a king, he's obviously just going to call. If Tom Dwan has a hand like Pocket Queens, probably just going to call. And if he has a much weaker hand like Ace-7, he may just fold to any bet on the river anyway. So I like the big bet. I think it's certainly a reasonable play. He may want to go smaller if he thinks for some reason Tom Dwan will call smaller bets way more often. But I like it. And this time, Tom Dwan does get away. So pretty cool hand. I'm not sure many people out there just float the flop in Elton Tsang's shoes, but I do think it's probably a good play, especially if you ever read that the big blind is going to fold a lot way back on the flop. If you think the big blind is going to call or raise a lot on the flop, then obviously you want to just fold the Jack-10 of hearts. But you need to be a little bit splashy and a little bit sticky. And notice that this keeps your opponents guessing. It makes their life difficult. And when you're playing poker, you don't want your opponents to have very, very easy decisions. What a lot of players mess up is they just raise when they have a good hand and they fold when they don't. And that's a big, 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 big mistake. So make sure you play in a manner that makes your opponent's decision difficult, because when they have difficult decisions, they're going to mess up. And when they mess up some portion of the time, that is when you make money. So that's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you want lots more cash game content, including my cash game masterclass, where I teach you how to beat cash games, head over to pokercoaching.com/premium to get that. And also click like and click subscribe. Have a great day. Good luck in your games, and I will talk to you next time.